Thank you, Elaine, for joining us for the CPO Association event. Can you quickly tell us your name and your role?
Sure. My name is Elaine Chao, and I'm a senior product manager at Adobe.
I think most people know about Adobe, but could you tell us quickly about Adobe and your products that you own?
Sure. So Adobe is actually a multinational company that does not only the Creative Cloud. I think everyone knows of Photoshop. Everyone knows of like this great creative software that we have. We also have our entire documents business. So you can think about PDFs. You know, Adobe is really well known for that. And we also have probably an area that not a ton of people know about, and it's called our digital experience area. And that's really about analytics and about measuring the impact of your marketing campaigns. So, you know, overall, Adobe has a really broad spectrum. What I work on is actually specifically on user experience and user interface design. It's a brand new product called Adobe XD.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit more about XD? I actually use it, but for some of the people who may not.
Sure. You know, XD is really about being able to iterate on your ideas and being able to just get your ideas down onto, and this is really like experiences, right? Digital experiences, whether it is on your phone or, you know, on your refrigerator, on like a smart, you know, trash can, whatever it is, to be able to rapidly design and prototype and be able to test your ideas. And also, as we take a look at like the broader experience that XD provides is also how you work together with your team. So thinking about, hey, you know, how do I get my experience actually, you know, implemented on a website or implemented on my smart garbage can, you know, that all takes like collaboration with developers and it, and also, you know, collaboration with clients and stakeholders and all sorts of people that are involved in your implementation. I am one of the founding members of Adobe XD. I was really privileged to be able to join as an engineer, and now I work as a product manager on XD, specifically in collaboration. So I was talking about like how people work together. My area of focus is working, designers working with other designers, specifically in the cloud. So I work with our entire infrastructure team to bring cloud documents and co-editing and all those experiences into the world, into XD.
Can you tell us about sort of the company philosophy or the team culture at Adobe in terms of product management? So I think there's companies that are very engineering driven, where a lot of the product ideas and the way the development occurs is engineering driven, and there's some that are more product driven, some are PMM driven, but how about Adobe and in particular your team?
Yeah, I'd say that, you know, Adobe's in the middle of transformation when it comes to how product is done. We actually on Adobe XD have a really deep partnership where we pretty much everything that happens as a partnership between PM, design, engineering, product marketing, and everyone has a seat at the table. So whereas product management is responsible for collating all of this and making sure that the users are heard.
There's a lot of challenges for a mature company like Adobe to sort of go into a brand new area and build a 1.0 product. But can you tell us about sort of some of your experience doing that?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I've actually worked in a number of different 1.0 products at Adobe. Like XD is not, XD is only the most recent one that I've worked on. And so actually, Ken, I think you and I worked on a 1.0 together as well. And so it's been a pattern, right, of being on the cutting edge of technology. And I think that there are some strengths and also some challenges of working at an existing company when it comes to like bringing a new product to bear. On the one hand, you know, with a large portfolio like Adobe has, they've been able to invest in a new product, right? It's easier because you have your investment right in your company where you're just like, oh yeah, we're totally going to invest 30 people to work on this for a couple of years, or like however many people, we're going to pour more resources on to be able to accomplish this goal faster. You know, with a big company, you have a lot of resources like that. At the same time, there's a lot of legacy that you also have to deal with, right? And so as we're taking a look at building up our overall ecosystem across Creative Cloud. Now you're talking about Photoshop and Illustrator who have like 25, 30-year-old code bases. You're talking about InDesign, you're talking about people who have like a lot of users who have deep relationships with these products because they've been using them for decades inside and out. And so that type of, friction, even just like bringing something new to market, does affect us as a new product as well, right? And so, even as we are able to accelerate our growth because we have a lot of investment and because we have really smart people, and we know how to work together, right? There's also kind of the challenges of knowing that everything that you do will eventually need to connect into this larger ecosystem, which then in turn means that you have a little bit of like friction. But that's also, I think, a part of the power, right, of working at a larger company with a larger ecosystem.
So how do you balance that innovation versus the platform?
Innovation versus the platform, very carefully. I will say that it is a constant balancing act, right? It's a constant negotiating act about what do you prioritize and why do you prioritize it? And, some of our product managers who work in that area, they have some really hard choices to make, right? Like when do we light up this, type of functionality that's going to take, however many hundreds of man months, to light up this functionality for 15 products, right? And so, as opposed to how do we address this thing for this one tiny little, new application. And I think it is a balancing act, but, it also helps that we do have people who have visibility across multiple organizations. So, whether it's our chief product officer, Scott Belsky, having visibility across the entire Creative Cloud. We have a centralized, chief technology officer who oversees a lot of the centralized technology that we rely on. And being able to have conversations from that level of like, well, what's important to us as an overall business, like Adobe.
Great. So in terms of ideation for XD, can you share any of how that idea came about? I'm personally very interested.
Yeah, before we started as a product, we actually had a small prototyping team. And so we had a product manager, a couple of engineers and a couple of designers working together on this prototype of like, well, what would it look like to have design and prototyping into the same surface? And I know now, taking a look at UX and UI, it's like, well, every single product has both design and prototype. But at the time, we were taking a look at an industry that was becoming more and more fragmented. Like you would take your designs in this product and move it over to this other product and then upload it to a third service. And then you'd have to repeat that over and over again. And so our initial product manager saw that as an opportunity for Adobe to really bring all of that underneath one umbrella and that entire experience into one umbrella. So we did do a lot of iteration and a lot of customer visits before the company decided to invest in it as a product. And at that point in time where it's like, yes, we're going to make it into a product, that's the point where I came in. And a number of other, team members to really begin to build this infrastructure and build this out as a product that would scale.
So is there a dedicated team that works on new products, or is it sort of like an 80%, 20% where you can start thinking new products at Adobe?
Yeah, so it's changed over time. Sometimes there are certain people on a team that will be, set out to do a skunkworks type of project. Sometimes it's someone who sells an idea to a VP and they fund them for a little while. There's a whole lot of ways that innovation can happen. There's also, innovation inside of the product. And so if you think about an existing product like Photoshop, how does innovation happen there? How does a feature like the neural filters, that recently released, how does that work, right? And so, there's a lot of different opportunities for people to get their ideas done. And, sometimes we'll have formal things like we've had something called the Garage Week, where, once or twice a year, engineers can just work on whatever they want to for a week. And it's just like, okay, all development stops, go, and so it could be a new feature idea, it could be, concept that they have. And we have like these little competitions at the very end where it's just like, here's my idea. And, some of them have made it into the product.
And in terms of building out a new 1.0 product, how do you work in terms of product market fit? So what are some of the things that you do?
First of all, it's opportunity, right? And then it's checking to see what people are saying once you present them a concept or have them use it for a while. One interesting thing that I've heard in terms of testing business ideas, et cetera, we had some consultants come in and teach us about lean business practice. Everyone, like all the way down, every single engineer got this to help us understand what it means, like how you test and like how to get information from people. What is it that people, want? And then, one of the things that we learned was that if there's competition in this area, it's a pretty good signal that people want to be there, right? If there's no people competing in that area, it's a pretty good signal that like no one's going to want to buy it, right? So, so I think that there's this constant testing that happens and this constant evaluation and listening that happens, and a lot of conversation.
XD is a monthly release. That must keep you pretty busy.
It does keep us really busy. We also have, by the way, in full disclosure, if I were to count the number of product managers and like managers, directors, et cetera, we're probably somewhere between 15 and 20. So it's a lot of people working, a lot of product managers working on this product, right? And so there's always something moving. There's always something that can land at a specific point in time when you have so many squads that are working on the release. But I think it's also that, we knew going into this that we wanted to release monthly. And so we built infrastructure to help us to be able to do that. And built in processes to be able to do that. I think in terms of like the actual feature releases, everyone has features that they're working on. Some of them are larger features that are targeted for a major, release date like Max. And some of them are like, whenever it's ready, we're going to ship it, right? And, as a result, we're able to bring value year-round to our customers.
My first experience working with research and with design and planning was at Adobe, and I'm sure it's changed over the years, but can you explain to us a little bit about that process?
So, research happens on a multiple level. It's actually, I'd say, maturing a little bit. At Adobe, we do have a centralized design organization. And so we have a VP of design and a lot of people reporting. And then those people are actually embedded within the product teams. And so I have design partners. I work with, an entire design organization that's geared specifically towards XD. And as a part of the design organization, we're also building out a research organization as well. So these are design researchers. A lot of them have their PhDs in some kind of social science. And so, they're doing research on, I'd say more of like an ethnographic phase. Is like, this is what this culture is doing. Like, one guy that I talked to today, he's like, yeah, so, my background is in linguistics, and it's all about like how people understand, made up terms. And I'm like, that's fascinating. And I can totally understand why you're researching for Adobe, right? Because now he's like testing product terms for us. Right. So, as I take a look at like how research is done, PMs also do research. Our product marketing people also do research. We're constantly running growth experiments. We're running experiments within the product. And so a big part of that is like, how do you aggregate the research that you do to help with your product learnings? And so, like I said, some of the research is qualitative, some of it is quantitative. All of it influences our roadmap in some way, shape, or form.
Actually going on site, or you mentioned that as well. Can you explain to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're in pandemic time, so we really haven't done a whole lot of that. But, it is important to us to make sure that we have a connection to our customer. And so we have been on the road. I think every single one of us in 2018, 2019 went on at least one visit, to support. And we had creative jams. So this was like an opportunity to host like an Adobe event in a particular city. But also as a part of that, we were able to visit anywhere between 6 and 10 customers in that city. And so they could be smaller agencies, they could be large enterprises, and we could sit and talk to them. And for me, it was great to understand how different teams work together, because I focus on collaboration.
And when you do in person, what's the typical team that goes to visit the customer?
So we do have our Strat Dev organization, which I mentioned before, strategic business development, and they partner with the larger enterprise customers. And they'll generally be a designer and a PM, and if possible, also an engineer. It always depends on funding, right? To help us to just basically sit down with it. And sometimes we'll have sales if it's a contact that was sourced through one of our sales people. And yeah, sometimes, someone from our community team who made the connection with us. Not all the companies that we reach out to and talk to are Adobe customers, which is fantastic, because like I'd love to hear what people are doing outside of the Adobe ecosystem. And yeah, it's generally a team of between 3 and 5 people who will go and visit a customer.
How do you keep everyone together and communicate?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how things have evolved. We do have a centralized Creative Cloud team, product team that works on centralized experiences, and they've actually been driving a lot of these conversations. So as a part of my job, the initiative that I've been working on, which is around the cloud ecosystem on XD, I actually sit on a council. And so this council is every PM who has something or will have something in the cloud. And we sit and we have a weekly meeting. We cover different topics. We share learnings with one another. We have a Slack channel where we're constantly talking, trying to figure,
I can only imagine how many meetings you're in on a typical week or a typical month. How do you balance your time between all of these various priorities and different teams?
That's kind of like the perennial problem of a PM, right? It's like trying to figure out, and I am working on multiple initiatives. And so, one of the things that I've been trying to learn is how to scale myself, right? And whether that means delegating or, trying to batch things together, trying to group people together. I'm working on one initiative that covers between 3 and 5 squads, depending on how, you talk about it. And so instead of meeting with every one of the squads, I have the leaders of those meetings in I have office hours for any of the engineers once a week. I have a leadership meeting where it's like just taking the leaders and the principal scientists on those teams to talk about the initiative that we're working on. I have a little whiteboard and I write down, here are the things that I'm tracking. Here are my initiatives. Here are like my top 3 to 5 things that I'm focused on this week. And then here are the things that I'm tracking. And here's my next time off, right? And so I send a snapshot of that every single week. So every Monday I look at that, I edit it as, if I finish something, it's great, it gets erased from the whiteboard. And then I send them like a photo of it every Monday so that they know like, oh, okay, this is, the one thing that, the top priority for Elaine, and my thing is not even on this list. So anything that I get is going to be special, right? It's going to be on top of like the major initiatives. So, so I think that that's like the communication and like the expectation setting of your teams is a big part of it.
So I think I've asked all the questions that I had originally planned. Is there anything that you wanted to mention or talk about?
You were mentioning that like for women, that there aren't a lot of people, a lot of women in Japan who are getting into product. I think for me, like getting into product in the first place was a lot of overcoming of my fear. Because when I first started in engineering, I saw like this thing where it was like we were on an 18-month cycle, and like I'd have a PM, and then it, you know, that thing might fail or something like that, and they get fired or they'd leave or they get laid off or something. And for me, like that type of uncertainty and that type of like, it really instilled a lot of fear in me, right? I was just like, I can't live that life. I can't live, you know, in such a stressful situation where I think that I could get like, I could lose my job if I don't do a good job. Mm-hmm. I think the industry and the expectations of PM has really changed over time, right? And I think that, you know, at least we're, you know, I've been a PM now for 4.5 years or so. And what I'm being judged on is not my success or not my product success in market. It really is like, what value am I bringing? What clarity am I bringing? What stories am I telling? How am I influencing? And how do I lead, right? How do I lead my team in a way that is sustainable? What insights do I bring? You know, how do I encourage other people, you know, to be their best? How do I enable my partner PMs to be able to get their jobs done as well? And so I think, you know, with this different measure of success, it becomes a lot easier for me to succeed because I'm no longer linking my job to my outcome. And I think there are a lot of companies that are shifting to that mindset where it's not necessarily like whether or not your product, you know, rises or falls that determines your success as a company. It's all the other value that you bring as a product manager. And so I think, you know, just an encouragement for people who have security needs, especially when it comes, like, those are totally valid. Like, I still live with those same kind of like, I love personal security, I love financial security, I love emotional security. Like, all of these things are like, is product management a risky proposition or is it not? And I think for, you know, and I think especially for women, that is something that we struggle with. So my encouragement is that the industry is changing, and to also interview and see if the place that you're looking at will be able to support you in that way and is, you know, a more modern way of doing product management, or if it's like stuck from like 20 years ago, right?
I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for all of your knowledge and sharing your experiences. I think it's going to be something that a lot of people are going to watch this and feel that they can identify with a lot of the stories that you shared, and hopefully get people more interested in product management in Japan.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been such a pleasure.